This is a video for advanced use, primarily for JavaScript developers who would like to use the workbench in their own work. Actually, the workbench was designed for developers as a convenient way to access your code without having to create your own user interface elements. So how does it work? Well, if you go to the Rome42 graph, rome42.com, you'll see that there's a workbench developer's guide in the sidebar, and that's what I'm looking at here, and it documents the API and the basic flow. Of course, this is subject to change, but this will give you the general idea. Let's come to my test database here. Basically, Rome42 creates a namespace, rome42.wbigb. And then a number of commands. So you can actually see that here I am in the developer console. And these are all kinds of objects available on the console. So if you're going to extend Workbench, you have to understand context. There are three types of context that the Workbench looks for. For example, right now, my cursor is in block 1, right here. That is a block context. The second context is if I have multiple blocks selected like that. So a multi-block selection, or anywhere. That means either a single block or multiple blocks or nothing selected is anywhere. And there's actually 3 commands available to you related to that. So rome42.wb.command add run from anywhere, .command add run from block, .command add run from multi-block selection. So you're going to use one of these 3 commands depending on the nature of how you want to use Workbench. And sometimes you use all of them to provide a specific feature depending on where the user is. Basically, you can examine the context of Rome, but this just gives you a little bit of a hint of what's going on. So what's involved in using these commands? Well, this makes the assumption that Rome42 is installed and active. So you need to make sure that Rome42 is installed and already running in memory. Let's see how we can use these commands. First, I'm going to create a code block here. Let's create a Rome.js block and then add some code underneath it. And just get some of the basics in place here. I always like to use kind of a namespace. Test equals. So this is just kind of setting up a namespace, and now I'll say test function. And let's run this function. The reason I do it this way is that I can run this command multiple times. So let's just do a console dump to test that it's working. Run. So test got dumped out, stop it, run it again, test got dumped out again. Now, oftentimes what you need to do is you need to set up like a timeout. And set this like to 20,000 milliseconds, which is 20 seconds, before you run code. That's because you need to wait for Rome42 to load upon launch. There's other ways of doing that, but this is the easiest way. A lot of developers do this. They just set a timeout. But since Rome42 is already running and we're just testing while it's in memory, we don't need to worry about that. So let's move on to using one of these commands. Let's start off by demonstrating a command that runs from anywhere. As you can see, it's expecting 2 parameters, text to display. That's actually what shows up here in the workbench menu. And then your callback function. So let's say hello world, and let's set up our callback function here. The callback will get passed in command information from the workbench. So you get some information about your command as it's launched. And let's just do a dump here to the console log. Hello world. And let's also dump out command info. So very simple. Add run from anywhere. Use the text hello world, and here is the function that we want to run. So let's click on yes, I know what I'm doing. It says await is available only in such functions. That is true. Let's make this an async function and call this with await, and let's try it again. That is true. So what we need to do is call it like this. Now we're just demonstrating code here. You would do this differently based on your own configuration, but this will just get us going in this trial mode. And I'm just going to launch a lot of ways. So this is a timeout that will run in 10 milliseconds, which is basically right away. It'll call this in async mode. There we go. But now we don't see that anything happened. That's because we've only registered the command. Let's actually pull up the workbench, type in hello world, and there it is. So you see hello world is there. If I click on it, no surprise, hello world, and the command information is dumped out here as well. So this is the information that you get back from workbench. If I stop it and run it again, and then pull up workbench, type in hello, you see there's the command. Again, we run it, no surprise. So basically we have our basic function running. Let's move forward. We're going to continue along. Let's copy this, and we want to say now we want to use the run from block. So hello world anywhere, that's our old function. Now we're saying run from block. And let us run this. Actually, we want to add this here so we know that it really worked. Let's add that here as well. Let's do this. All that does is register. Now we say hello world. And you'll see the old entry is still there and our new ones are there. That's because basically it gets added to an in-memory list that is refreshed upon every restart. But if you're doing a lot of development and the menu gets kind of weird, you can just use the reload workbench command. It's included in the workbench. It reloads. It takes about 4 or 5 seconds, and then if I pull it up again and type in hello world, I actually have to stop and restart my code. Now if I do it again, there it is. Hello from anywhere, hello from block. Now you'll notice I'm in a block, so both of these commands are pulled up, but if I deselect the block and pull up the menu and type in hello, we only see hello from anywhere because the block has been selected. So let's do hello world from block. You can see it did that. Let's do hello world from anywhere, enter, and as you can see that worked. The last context that we have to deal with is multiple block selection. And I don't think there's going to be any surprise here about how this works. Grab the command name, add that, hello from block selection. So let's stop this. Let us reload the workbench. That way we have a clean memory. Once it's loaded, we can now say run our code, and basically our commands have been added. So now I'm in a block. I pull up the command window, type in hello. We don't see our hello from block selection. That's because we haven't selected multiple blocks. So let's do that. Type in hello. Now you can see hello world from block selection or anywhere. So again, it's context sensitive, and you determine the context that you want. And then based on the context, you react to that. Your command might do something with the user interface, so it should run from anywhere. Maybe it changes something with the local block, so it should only run from the local block. Or maybe it's going to do a multi-block interaction, and then you get the context. Everything that you've seen so far is just simply about getting your command into the workbench. One of the things that you'll probably notice about the workbench is it has this ability also to navigate your outline. So you can type a page name, press enter, and then all the blocks that are there are visible, and you can do various things with it. It could be that you want to use the path navigator in your command. That is not included in these commands, but it is possible. If you go up to the Workbench Developer's Guide and you scroll down to Path Navigation, you can actually get to the Path Navigator, and here is the API function. For that, let's discuss that. Let's add it to our list. You'll see it looks a little bit different because it's actually in a separate library. It's rome42.wb.path.launch. So you can actually call the path launcher from your command. How would you use this? Well, there's actually a nice little, very simple demonstration of code up here that you can use. Why don't we grab this code and we will walk through it together. Let me just clean it up real quickly. Actually, let's do it like this. So this is a command that's actually going to call the navigator, and when the navigator is finished running, it's going to actually call the display output command, and it's doing it from this command here. So let us move that into here. Okay, let me walk you through what's going on here. It looks more complicated than it is. As you recall, we're going to load asynchronously this function here, and it's going to register a command called display navigator info, and it passes in a callback function called show navigator. So this again just is going to show it in the workbench menu. This says when this command is executed, call the navigator, and here is the function for navigator, and it's going to call the rome42.wb.path.launch command, which will open the path navigator, and then after a destination is selected, another callback function will be called, passing in the information. So display output is called, and it receives two variables: output UID, so what is the block that was selected by the user in the navigator, and what was the text in there, and then I'm just dumping it out to the log. So let's run this and let's hope it works. So turn the code on, and again it's display navigator info. Let's pull up the workbench, control semicolon, navigator, and there it is. So we see it's there. I press enter. Oh, and it pulled up the path navigation tool. And now the user can either type a page in or select one of the default actions, and then from there select one of the blocks that's relevant. And as you see in the console, it dumped out the UID of the block that I selected and the text that was in there. Let me just do that one more time. So navigator, let's go to the page test, and there's only a few blocks there. Let's select demonstration of move to DNP, and it dumped out demonstration of move to DNP along with the UID. There are a lot of other parameters available to you here that are optional. You don't have to call them. For example, the callback function we already saw is required. Exclude UIDs. You can actually pass in a list of block UIDs that you don't want to show up in the navigator. So it'll actually filter those out for you. You can also pass in a start UID and a start string. It could be that you already know what page you want to utilize, or you want a certain block to be a starting point, so you can actually pass that into the navigator, and when it appears, that'll be the starting point for navigation. So it will take a little bit of experimentation with the API, but it's really quite simple. Command add run from anywhere, command add run from block, command add run from multi-block selection, and optionally you can call the workbench command as well. Here it is, roam42.wb.path launch. As you saw, adding a command is actually pretty simple, but if you want to see all the roam42 commands that are built into workbench and how they work, you can actually go up to the GitHub repository for roam42, go into the folder called extensions, and if you scroll down here, you'll see a number of files. Workbench is the master file. That's all the UI and all the navigation. Workbench path is also the path navigation code. But what's likely going to interest you is workbench commands. And roam42 uses the API that I just showed you for everything that it does in workbench. So we use our own API for the same functionality that you can build. And you can come in here and see all the commands and how they're done. They're pretty advanced. They also integrate tightly with other roam42 libraries. But if you want to create your own version of some of the functions, you can basically copy and paste the code and do some tweaks and end up with your own version. So that's it for now. The JavaScript stuff, if you need some help, you know how to get a hold of us.